On today's episode, we welcome Jon Zeolla, founder of Zenable. John, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No worries. So, can you tell us a bit about your background in cybersecurity and what brought you to start the business?
Yeah, for sure. I started in cybersecurity somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, depending on how you measure it. And um, I built a lot of security programs, mostly focused on like things like DevSecOps, um, application security, cloud security, things like that. I started before we had the cloud, but we were building similar sort of processes on-prem. And initially I found that I really wanted to scale the sorts of problems that I could solve. So I started a consulting company and I started doing that for a while. And so I was building like technical solutions for all these different organizations, which was really fun because I got to focus just on these like technical bits and I didn't have to deal with, how slow the business operated, any of the bureaucracy and meetings and things like that. So that was kind of cool. But I found that I was like reinventing the wheel. Like I was solving the problem and then solving that same problem again in another company and
Mm.
again at another company. And I wanted something that had a little bit more persistence that I could build and help more people over time and give everybody kind of a better shared solution and we could all benefit from it. And so
Mm.
I did a series of open source projects to like frame out the idea to see if it would work, to see if I'd get some adoption. That went really well. And so I ended up turning it into a company. That's what Zenable is today. Essentially a combination of like the last 15, 20 years of me working on a variety of different tools and DevOps pipelines and automation and things like that. Just kind of like fed now with this new, era of AI, which is kind of cool.
And how long did it take to start Zenable from all that experience? Did it take you like a year or so, or?
Yeah, so I've been doing Zenable for about 3 years now, and I think, I guess when we were first kind of viable, like how long did it take me to actually build something useful? It was probably about 9 months.
Oh.
So about 9 months in, we had something that was actually useful that companies started adopting, and it solved some sort of a problem. And then since then, we've just kind of been like adding more features.
Hmm. And how did all that experience from those other businesses helps you to start your businesses on your part? Because like you just mentioned, I think you were only concentrating on like doing problem solving, and now in business it's like marketing, doing the client, the meetings. So how did
Yeah.
the experience help you start that business?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that it helped me with was focus. So not trying to make a solution that solved every single problem because it's very easy with AI. AI is so flexible, right? It's so easy to try to solve 10 different problems, 20 different problems, and solve them all kind of to like a mediocre degree. Like, AI is wonderful at prototyping and getting something done that kind of looks good. But if you really want to dig into the details, make sure it stays good quality, evaluate it, build integration so it's easy to set up and use and things like that, like you really have to focus. And so like my background, like running businesses and helping businesses run really like hit home that I need to focus. I need to pick one niche. And so that for me, that niche is software development, right? Like how do you use AI tools to write software? And then, there's literally dozens, probably hundreds of different integrations that you could build, all kinds of different IDEs, version control systems, pipelines, runtimes, etc. So it's just like, how do I focus a little bit and then just like completely cover, every sort of like integration that someone would need if they're using AI to write code.
And inside, since you were in cybersecurity, how did you got outside of that niche? Because you work with cybersecurity, that's your entire experience, and now you're in
Yeah.
a bit of something else. Like, how did you not
Well,
see like that problem there?
yeah. So when I worked in cybersecurity, I was always a builder. Like I was like writing software and building things by
Oh,
hand back in the day, right? And so that kind of translated really well
okay.
to the sort of stuff that I'm doing now. The other thing, security is interesting because we have a lot of compliance focus and audits, right? You might need to just prove to another company that you're secure, like your business partners or your customers or things like that. And so you're constantly providing some level of evidence and you're trying to get someone else to become comfortable with what you've done.
Hmm.
And with AI and writing code, it's essentially the same paradigm, right? We're using AI to generate code and we're trying to get developers and product people and business leaders to be comfortable with what the AI made. And so it's the same concept, it's just kind of like flipped around, right? So it's kind of like so you could think of there's like security of the AI code, right? So is the AI generated code secure? And that's like one facet of what's useful, but really what we care about is the quality of it. And quality encompasses security and encompasses compliance, but there's other things too. There's like performance and standardization and design and cost and all of these other dimensions that are really a part of like a good quality system. And quality is just like a superset. I think it kind of like builds on top of what you do in cybersecurity. So a lot of that sort of security evidence gathering and data driven decision making, like how do I gather evidence? I hate to say proof, how do I gather evidence that I can show to someone and then they can make their own decision on if we're doing what they want us to or not? It's the same thing, except now we're kind of building an evidence gathering machine around AI generated code. And then how do we send that to the developer so the developer can say, oh, I am comfortable this thing did meet my expectations or not.
Okay. And in simple terms, is that what Zenable do? Like what does your business does in what we just talked about?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Zenable is focused on helping companies use AI to generate code
Okay.
and make sure that that code meets their expectations. Right.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like a very big statement, right? Meet your expectations. Well, what does that mean? Because some of the biggest problems with software development is that expectations are a mix of explicit, like we've said it needs to do A, B, C, and D, and implicit, which are kind of like, a human can just look at it and see, but it's not written down in text. And if it's not written down, sometimes it's hard for an agent to get that right the first time. And then similarly, when a developer says, make me I need a new button, whatever, they might not explicitly mention all of the requirements that they have of that button. It needs to be on the right, but it also needs to disappear or move when it's mobile. And it needs to be configurable colors. And when it should be disabled in these cases and enabled if it has the right data, all of these different implicit things. When developers are writing software, like one of the biggest problems today is that the prompts, what they tell it, are underspecified. It just doesn't contain all of the details that AI could use.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, if every developer fully specified everything that they wanted whenever they asked it to do something, they would never get anything done, right? There's just like so many requirements and expectations that they have. And so what Zenable does is it's kind of like a continuous learning and improvement system that monitors what has happened and what is currently happening and tries to infer what are mistakes, what is right, and build and engineer that context and then automatically inject it into the AI as upfront. And then when the AI creates something, it also provides guardrails and agents to validate the output. So it's kind of think of it as like help the developers tell it the right thing on the way in and then do a really good job of checking it on the way out.
And when you say tell it, is it still with language, English language, like vibe coding, or it's really like a coding, like a coder would talk with?
Yeah, it could be either. The way Zenable really excels when you have like teams of people working on software. Like it's not just like one person vibe coding something, but you have a peer review process because some of the things like during peer review, what you could have one person kind of comment on how another person made code. And it might be, hey, you don't have to fix this, but I would have done it this different way. Or like, did you consider A, B, C, and D? And the first developer would say, oh, yes, I did. Or no, I forgot that one. Let me go look at it, etc. And what's useful about that conversation is, first of all, it's a very natural thing. Like it's already a good software development practice.
Yeah.
But the second thing is it's available as text, which is what Zenable hooks into. So along with other things, we'll gather that information and say, oh, this developer that was reviewing someone else's code added an insight that the first developer didn't have. And maybe that should have been injected as context when the developer started, even if they didn't know that it was a requirement. Like, can we make an AI-based system that would know that that's a requirement and inject it properly? And so that's like part of what we do as well. And so when there's teams of people writing code and peer reviewing and things like that, the Zenable system kind of observes and finds mistakes, things that you like. If you introduced a bug, everybody introduces bugs, right? If you introduce a bug and then you fix it later, it kind of performs this self-thinking like, okay, what could I have done back then to make sure that bug wasn't there in the first place? And it does like a root cause analysis. And then it says, great, well, can I actually implement that now? So like, yes, that one bug happened, but can we make it never happen again? Which is very similar to what we do in security, right? Like in security, we have these very complete incident management systems and root cause analysis, 5 whys, et cetera. And we essentially want to say, okay, we got broken into, we had a breach. How do we make sure we never have a breach again? And you do an analysis, root cause, and you spin out projects, and then those projects mitigate the risk, right? It takes your risk from an unacceptable to an acceptable level, because you can never make risk zero, right? But you can drop it down a lot by putting in these projects.
Mhm.
We can do the same thing with context and guardrails for AI code, and so that's a lot of what we do.
And is there more guardrails whenever you do it with English speaking other than coding? Like when you vibe code, is there more errors or more things that are not
Yeah.
properly done? So like the AI will work a bit more since you English speak to it, or how does that work towards that?
Yeah, exactly. Like the AI is playing a little bit more of a fill in the gap
Yeah.
now because things are going faster. When you're typing in or speaking to your agent, you kind of leave, you miss things, right? You just don't fully elaborate. And
Mhm.
so what these context engineering and guardrails tools can do is fill in those blanks for you instead of letting the AI guess. Because to
Mhm.
be honest, the AI does a pretty good job of guessing. It's
Yeah.
just that maybe out of 100 times, it's only going to get it right like 70, which is more than half. That's great, but that's still 30 out of 100 mistakes. And if you're moving really fast, you might do 100 every 2 or 3 days, right? And so now you're adding 30 mistakes every, bugs, vulnerabilities, mistakes, whatever, like pretty constantly. And then the other thing that's really tricky is there's not this like uniform agreed upon definition of what's a mistake because
Mhm.
every company has different trade-offs, right? Different pros and cons and different contracts and requirements and compliance. Different countries have state laws, country laws, provinces, etc. And so like there is no clear cut, this is always true, this is always right. Like it's always going to be customized for each organization.
Mhm.
And so that's something that we really try to focus on with Zenable is not can we tell you this generically true things and find things that are clearly bugs. Like there's lots and lots of tools out there that will find like clear 100% bugs. What's trickier is can we help the AI generate code according to your trade-offs, your decisions, the way you do things, and enable companies to really pick what they want, pick what's good. Some companies might choose performance over security.
Yeah.
And in some scenarios, that's actually a very okay thing,
Yeah.
right? And in other places, you might, security at all costs, right? Or security, but there's kind of like a cutoff point. You get diminishing returns. The more money you spend on it, the less actual risk reduction you're going to get. And so you got to draw a line somewhere. And so whatever your like risk tolerance threshold is going to be unique for each company, and you want your code and your software and your systems to kind of align with that. Otherwise, you're spending money on things that don't make sense. Like you're like wasting money. You're securing you can't spend $10 million to secure something that's worth $1 million.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, right? You're losing money, and so there's always this sort of balance, and so it's like how do you kind of navigate that balance in ways that's like unique for each organization.
And how do you know, like how does the AI know which thing they need to think about? Is that like a setup from when you guys start with the business, they know which country, so they know which compliance to go with, or the performance and more security? Is that just a setup of the AI when they start with you, or how does that get set up?
Yeah. So you can absolutely set that up. What we found when we actually talk to people is that nobody knows, right? Like there's
Okay.
so many, they know some of it, but they don't know all of it,
Yeah.
right? And so they say, okay, well, I've got 30 things. We can put 30 things in and that's good. We'll start with that.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I think every company is in that situation, whether they know it or not, right? Nobody, like I used to help build the teams whose entire job was to know what the requirements are just from a security and a compliance perspective. And even those people would not know all of the requirements. And that's all they do. 24, that's their entire job, right?
Right.
So for a developer to know that, or a product person or an executive to know that, like it's not reasonable, right? It's not reasonable. And so like, how do we uh, make it so that you can enter things that you do know, but then also it'll just learn automatically
Mhm.
through observation, right? It can kind of observe, oh, we're moving into Europe. We're going to add a new office in Germany. What compliance requirements apply specifically to Germany, to Europe? Do I have to care about GDPR now or not? Um, and every company, it's like an organism, right? It's like constantly like learning and evolving and changing. And so you can never, it's no set and forget. You can't just like, even if you did know it up front, it would be outdated in 3 weeks, right? Because you sign a new contract that has a new requirement in it, like you have to account for that requirement. And so uh, there is a way to enter information, and you can upload documents and you can synchronize it with, wiki pages or, SharePoint or whatever you've got. And like that gets you started. But what's more important is, especially with AI, because AI is going to enable everyone to move faster. What's more important is that your system learns from the changes that your business is making and quickly gets those into requirements and guardrails for the code. 'Cause I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a developer and I said, "Hey, there's this new project. We got to build it out. It's going to be in this country. Have you started thinking about that?" And they're like, "What are you talking about? What project?" Right? And it's like, "Oh, like there's this big deal that's being sold over here, but it's still in the sales process and it
Right.
hasn't been signed yet. It hasn't like trickled through the organization down to the developers yet." And
Hmm.
so like that stuff happens all the time. And if you've got thousands or tens of thousands of people in your organization or even hundreds, like how can you tell? Communication is a massive problem, just letting people know that there's this new change or requirement. And so we can use AI and context engineering and guardrails and all of these integrations to automate that part and feed that context back to the AI that's being used to generate code, so that like yes, we want our people to know those things, but we also know that people aren't perfect and they're never going to know or remember everything. So I love the word copilot. Like GitHub and Microsoft uses the word copilot. I really love that because it's like, how do we come alongside and assist and help the people that are doing work and maybe just like remind them, hey, did you remember that we have this thing coming up, or this thing just signed, or we just had this change? Because especially if you've been at a company for a long time, 5 years, 10 years, you might really feel like you understand its requirements and its dynamics, but in reality, you're going to be biased based off of the history of 5 or 10 or 15 years.
Mhm.
And it's more likely that you're going to forget things that just changed,
Yeah.
right? And how that like kind of promulgates through the whole stack of requirements and what, implicit expectations or stuff that you have in the past that worked then but don't work now. Like kind of what expectations have been broken.
And then especially with like new AI coming up, probably new regulations or cybersecurity changing to like quantum at some point. Maybe it's like all those new compliance, all those new things might come in. So it's like, how do I keep track of that? And the AI can probably help you to do that. On your
Yeah.
side, in your own business, I think we mentioned that you do use AI for marketing compliance. How does all of that works for you? What did work well, or what didn't really work well on your part?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've tried. There's definitely, I think one of the biggest problems we have right now is low quality AI outputs, right? AI slop.
Hmm.
And people just slamming LinkedIn and X and making ads with AI. It's really annoying, right? And so I'm kind of doing my best to not contribute to that problem. So I use AI for brainstorming, for refining, for
Mhm.
double checking. Like it's very good at those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Um, I try to instill like a very opinionated seed anytime that I'm using AI. Like that is me. That's kind of like my opinions and my thoughts, and have that really come through. I might use AI to refactor a sentence, but I try not to have AI write a whole blog post
Yeah.
and do it from there. Like you kind of seed it with your own writing style and your own ideas, and then maybe use it to expand a little bit or flesh out ideas. Or actually, another thing I really like is brainstorming. Hey, I'm going to build this thing. I've thought of A, B, C, and D. Here's the pros. Here's the cons. Tell me more pros and more cons, right? Like expand my horizons a little bit.
Right.
And I found that be very useful. Honestly, I never accept all of its ideas, right? All of the pros and cons that it comes up with. But sometimes it will come up with a new concern that I didn't really think about. It requires a little bit more research, and having it do that research um, is really useful. I think another thing that I do is like data analysis with
Mhm.
AI. It's just very good at doing what's called exploratory data analysis, like just looking at giant piles of data, chopping it up, and getting like the high level trends. Like I
Right.
used this for some cost analysis recently. Like I had this intuition, which ended up being wrong, but I had this intuition that I like, let's say I had like ten spots where I divide my costs.
Mhm.
And I had this idea that one of them was taking about 20% of that cost. I'm like, all right, maybe I want to find a way to reduce that. So how can I spend less money, but keep quality the same or even better, right? But before I did that, and then that improvement, that cost optimization, I was like, oh well, let me just confirm my assumption. And I had AI build a bunch of data gathering and dashboarding and things like that. Me and my team put this together, and what we found was that was actually like 0.1% of our cost. And I was very surprised by this. There was a couple things, when it would run, it was quite large, but it ran less often than I thought it did.
Mm.
And then the other part of it was one of the other chunks of my tech stack was way more expensive than I thought it was. And so, those two things really moved the scales. I'm like, great, well, I don't care about optimizing my 0.1% of my expenses anymore. Like, so the bottom line is like, that's very important. Like just kind of anytime you go to optimize something, doing some data driven analysis and say, is it actually going to give me the ROI that I think it's going to be? I decided I wasn't going to spend any time on that 0.1% cost. And I went over to that other system that was way bigger and more expensive than I thought. And almost instantly I could cut that in half. Right. And so I was like, wow, I made a much bigger dent. I saved way more money. Quality is exactly the same. And I saved all the time optimizing, 0.1 to 0.05% of my cost. Like, who cares? Right. Like it's just not making a big dent. And so um, I like I said, I've used it for other things, for marketing, for task management, and troubleshooting, data analysis. It's really good at a lot of those things. But as a business owner, like staying skinny, like
Mhm.
staying tight and lean, and not having like excess costs, like just having a job that runs on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, that does that like data analysis, populates a dashboard, and gives me something to say, oh, that is way more expensive now. What changed? And even like it doesn't even have to be all AI. Like you could use AI to do the analysis and
Mhm.
then have it write code that just runs every hour, and it's just code
Mhm.
running every hour. So it's very cheap and easy, but AI is monitoring and managing and double checking that the dashboard doesn't have a fatal flaw, because that's another mistake, is that you analyze the data but you have like a something that's being left out, some information that should be included that just doesn't work, and having it like double check itself, it's like really powerful.
I think that's a great way to use it if you're actually having good data to make it look at. Because like if you just try to ask him like, look at this company, what they did, and you don't really know the data from it, then they can invent some and then create false statistic that comes back, and you're like, oh, that's not even good, and then you're doing action
Yeah.
on wrong things. But now that you have your own actual data pushed to it, then
Oh
it's
yeah.
actually
I
good.
mean, definitely like garbage in, garbage out, right? Like if you don't have good data, then none of that analysis is going to work. And if you don't analyze it well, your results or visualizations aren't going to be good either. And so taking a very like intentional step and performing some validation of the data, like and a lot of this experience comes from being audited a bunch, like in compliance, like especially when I was consulting, I was a part of an audit pretty much every week.
Mm.
And the reason for that was because I had different clients on different schedules getting audited, and I was there to augment them, to essentially back them up, help them. So I was kind of like working on their technology, and when a tricky question would come up in the audits, I would get that, but I would get to like constantly hear these audit questions, and I love them because they're so like useful, but they're also so simple. You know, um, I see here in your document you said that you always do this. Yes, we always do that. The simplest possible follow-up question is, how do you know? And so many people are like, well, because it's our well, that's not no, because it's your process, you don't know if your process is, so how do you know? Do you have data points or something? And then that's where you'd get a lot of scrambles. Where teams would be like, well, I don't we have tickets, and they're like, okay, great, so can you show me how many times that has happened and how many tickets you have for that, and do those numbers match? Again, a very simple question, but almost every time you have 173 over here and 170 over here, and you're like, well, what happened to those three in between? And you're like, well, face palm. I I don't know. We have to go figure out. We just found a gap that there's three times where this process should have happened and it didn't. And so that's where like I'm very data driven. So like I always want these two different data points, how many times did something happen? And then how many times did this process happen? And then I can cross reference and say, does 173 equal 173? If it doesn't, then I usually do either daily or weekly jobs, like overnight, to just like compare that because I want to know pretty quickly that there's an issue. Some of this stuff I'll do in real time, but usually I'll end up doing like nightly jobs. And every morning I wake up to, hey, everything ran overnight and you were in sync, or hey, we found a discrepancy. I don't know what's going on here, but we expected 17 and we saw 16. So, and then that becomes like a little, usually another AI job to do some research, and then I go manually kind of find triage and fix it. But it's really, keeping on top of the data and analyzing it and like double checking yourself using AI. It's like extremely powerful.
And how much did that help you to like take new decision or run in your business into another direction or take action
Yeah.
on a decision like how because you're doing now every ish week, so did that help you in the
Mhm.
past now that you're using like, oh, this is not good, we have to change it again and again and again?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm a huge data nerd with this. Like, how do I measure? How do I get more telemetry? And it really should feed all the way. Like, if you're running a company, like it should go to your product retention, your customer happiness, right? Feedback that you get from users. And so I have dashboards. So we get, a lot of our system is AI driven, but a lot of it is not as well. It's very deterministic. And that's actually part of the value prop of the value proposition of Zenable is that we don't use AI for everything. Like there are some things that are deterministic. So with certainty that if the bad thing happened, you would have got a result. It doesn't just forget like LLMs do. Like LLMs are great because they're flexible, but they just forget and they make mistakes. And so the deterministic part of the stack is really useful for like audit evidence and things like that. And so given that background, like I'm always looking for a different data point to corroborate what I'm doing. And a lot of that comes from like customer feedback. Like one of the things we do is we post comments on pull requests, right? When they make code changes. And if a user gives it a thumbs down or a thumbs up, like that's really important signal. Or if they type a comment, we can use AI to do sentiment analysis and say, was it good, positive feedback, negative feedback? Was it mixed feedback, some good, some bad? And we have all these different classifiers for that. And we have a trend of that. And generally I want my trend to be improving. I don't expect perfection, but I expect progress, right? Like we're wherever we are today, I expect to be slightly better tomorrow and just generally go in that direction. So I have tons of dashboards that I can go look at and see if it trends in the right direction. But also I have a second job that says, look at the last 7 days. And if the trend is going in the wrong direction, then I get an alert, right? And so a lot of what I find out is actually that I'm measuring the wrong thing, right? Like that's the tricky part is what do you measure? Because I can measure all kinds of silly things, but they might be all over the board or it might not actually help. Like when things should be going good when the charts trend in the right direction. And if the chart isn't trending in the right direction and I'm still going well, it's probably an indicator that I'm just measuring the wrong thing. And so I'm kind of like constantly thinking about what data, like what do I need to analyze to see this information, and then how do I keep an eye on it over time?
And what are those data that you found that are actually good to track for yourself and your business?
Customer feedback, like sentiment. So we have integrations like directly into IDEs like Claude Code, Cursor, Windsurf, Copilot, all of those sorts of things. We have like 50 integrations there. And we can analyze if the human submits a prompt which says like ignore that, ignore what the guardrail said, ignore whatever. And anytime we see that, that's an indicator that we gave bad feedback. And so we tag all of those, we call them a findings that got negative sentiment or mixed sentiment. And then we do nightly and weekly jobs to kind of like aggregate those and try to find trends of mistakes. And that's where the system really gets powerful, is like it's learning from these trends. And so it's not just like, I said this was bad, fix it. It's, over the last week, we've got 100 points of feedback from this one person, and 30 of them seem to be all the same thing. Can we improve that one bundle to kind of like make that 30 out of 100 better? And then what's the next most important thing to refine or improve for them? And just kind of like keep doing that over and over and over. And so when people give you feedback, if you can extract sentiment of it, are they happy or not? That's extremely important because it doesn't matter. I could say that the user made a mistake and the user was wrong, but ultimately happiness is a part of any product. And so even if they were technically wrong and they didn't understand it, I say, kind of look internally and say, could I have explained it better so that they understood it, right?
Mm.
Maybe I should have known that this was a more junior developer or a more senior developer, and I should have customized my output to fit where they're at or to fit their preferences.
Mm.
Sometimes negative feedback is just, I agree with what the AI said, but it used too many words to do it, right? It was too many emojis, too many M dashes, whatever. And
Yeah.
so it's like, that's perfect feedback. So like the AI, the core of the feedback, the core of the guardrails is not actually wrong, but maybe we need to tune how we express that back to the user or back to the user's AI. And that's totally good feedback, right? And that's,
Mm.
if it's to their AI, we could reduce token costs by doing that. Like that's great. Or maybe it's a junior developer and they need more explanation, right? So how do we now customize our outputs based on the individual person? And this is something we've done. Like we can customize based on the persona, and every person in a company can be different. And so it's the same exact finding, but it goes through a customization layer to say you prefer bullets, to the point, direct, short and sweet. That's me, right? But other people might like want explain when it's this category of thing. Maybe it's someone who self-identifies like they don't understand accessibility very well. It's like, hey, anytime you have an accessibility finding, explain why. Give me some things to research because I want to learn and understand this better. But if
Mm.
it's a security finding, you don't need to explain that. My gap is in accessibility. So you can absolutely take that category, the findings of that category, and then pass them through an output customization for the user's settings to say, okay, well, I'm going to explain this a little bit more and give it more context, or I'm going to be direct and to the point. And all of that comes from this sentiment analysis and really like looking at why did they say it's good or bad, and kind of just understanding the full picture. Because it's not always that the AI was wrong. It's just maybe it was formatted wrong, or there's some sort of, it didn't talk to me like a cowboy. I told it always to talk to me like a cowboy, and it didn't. And I didn't think it was funny enough. Some people are like, and that's totally fine. Like again, they people build a relationship with these products, and you want that relationship to be positive. So however you can customize that, that's the flexibility we get with AI.
Hmm. And just coming back on compliance that we talked a little bit throughout the podcast, is there any compliance that are starting to emerge that like business need to maybe keep track of with their data, their AI, how they use all of that? Is there something that small, medium business should keep their eyes on?
Yeah, there's a number of different frameworks out there right now. Like ISO came out with 42,000 and one, which is specific to AI. There's a new one. It was AI UIC or something along those lines. Um, and yeah, it's interesting that all of these frameworks are new,
Yeah.
right? All of these frameworks are kind of in their infancy, and so we'll see what adoption looks like. Um, there's been a lot of companies that I talk with have, they're kind of intrigued by what they could benefit, how they could benefit as a company by adopting these different frameworks and
Nice.
compliance standards. And
Mhm.
then other companies are wondering how they can ask their vendors for evidence of these compliance standards
Mm.
to manage risks. Like so many companies are introducing AI, and the retention, the third party vendors, the training of it, and the managing their data. If I put my stuff into this tool, it
Yeah.
used to be fine. I used to have a great data protection agreement, but now they added AI, and that part of their stack is not the same as the other ones. That could
Mm.
be a surprise to them, and they don't want to, they want to turn it off, or they don't want to use it. And so all of these frameworks are very new, but being looked at from those different angles.
Hmm. So just going back to your business, what's the big goal of Zenable for the next 6 to 12 months? Looking for is compliance and all of those things coming in.
Yeah. Uh, my goal with Zenable is to make it be as helpful as possible, right? So we are trying to find people that are using AI to write code,
Hmm.
either individually or on teams, and they want to see their systems get better. They just, for whatever definition that is, they want to clearly see a trend of following their expectations more and more over time, being able to say less in their prompts and get more quality outputs from them. And so we're really trying to just focus on growth at the kind of the usage level. And we've seen this a lot. We used to say, oh, it's great. We would review when we were very early, 1 million lines of code a month. And then it was 1 million lines of code a week, then a day. Then it was 10 million lines of code a day. And we've kind of like kept growing and growing and growing. And so it's the number of people that are using our platform, because that's a good indicator that there's like word of mouth going on, because we're 100% organic. We don't do any ads. Pretty much we grow by word of mouth, by people hearing from us on these sorts of like podcasts and things like that, presentations that I give. But we're not, spending millions of dollars in ads or anything like that to get in front of people. And so like having more people sign up is a good indicator of growth for us. But then the second one is the people that are using the platform use it more and more, right? Like they're actually able to go faster. And so we measure bugs findings, and we measure development velocity. And what we want to see for every one of our users is that they get more code shipped, like done, not just drafted, but actually finished, merged domain, deployed to production, and that the relative number of bugs is going down at the same time. So it should be very easy to work with the platform. The feedback, the sentiment should be trending in the right direction, and the velocity should go up while the bugs go down. Like that's an indicator of success for me. So that's really what we're focused on right now.
That's great. So thank you, Jon, for your time. That was it for the podcast. I really appreciate the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.